Well, good day. I'd like to welcome you to another North Road Investment Council communication piece. This is Marshall McAlister with, again, North Road. I'm the president and one of the portfolio managers here at this firm. I'd like to welcome Matt Knight. Matt Knight is with the Alberta Family Business Institute in connection to the University of Alberta Business School. Welcome to our conversation, Matt.
Thanks, Marshall.
Matt and I have overlapped a little bit in our personal lives and our professional lives, and I've had a chance to speak to Matt on a number of occasions about the work he's doing with the Alberta Family Business Institute, and I find it really interesting. Matt, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your personal story and then the story that's connected to the origin of the Alberta Family Business Institute.
Sure. So I'll give you a high-level overview there. But yeah, like you mentioned, my name is Matt Knight. Kind of formal role is both as executive professor with the Alberta School of Business, teach mostly in family business, strategy, and management consulting. And then as part of that role, I'm the executive director of the Alberta Business Family Institute. And with ABFI, we really work with family businesses and business families and advisors to help them, better tell their stories, but also bring, that education and research from the School of Business and from universities around the world into content that makes sense. So we like to have conversations that are, really practitioner and family orientated, and take, some of the great work and research that's being done, from some of these business schools and kind of translate them into things that make sense.
Yeah.
I know I don't enjoy reading these, 120-page peer-reviewed papers, and most people also don't want to spend their Friday afternoons that way. So having that intermediary that, could be a podcast or a blog or, just kind of a quick video is a much more powerful message for people who are really busy in their business and family lives.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in saying that, you are working on your PhD, right, at the University of Calgary. So you might be one of the odd people that like reading these journals every once in a while, right?
Yeah, but even my focus there is on really focusing on that translational research. So I'm not trying to create brand new theories or anything like that. What I'm actually doing in that, in the thesis there is looking at I've identified a subsector of people within family businesses that I call builders. And these builders are the ones that make a massive impact on their business or their family. Sometimes it's the founder. Sometimes it's someone who decides to start the family office. Sometimes it's someone who wants to go off and start a foundation. Sometimes it's a, third generation family business member who can just kind of grow that business and scale it to new heights.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at these builders and trying to figure out what characteristics and traits and experiences and education got them to that point. So trying to look at their lives, before and after and during the family business and figure out what made them that builder and what made them have that impact on their business family.
Right. I remember you telling me that behind every family business here in our province and in Canada, there's a great story. Can you think of a great story connected to your institute and maybe the impact that the institute is having within the business community, Matt?
Yeah. So we've been around we were started in the early 90s by a group of four, influential and well-known business families across the province who really wanted more awareness, research, and education on business families. And one of the things that we do that has become part of our story is actually doing an annual event that we call the Signature Event. And what we do with that is we bring people together every year in October. In Edmonton and Calgary, we have anywhere from kind of, 150 to 450 people, depending on the room, and depending on the city. The Edmonton events are typically just over 400 people. And we want to kind of feature one business family and their story. So we walk them through, kind of how they got to where it is and what complexities and relationships and dynamics they've had to navigate along the way. And, quite often it is Alberta-based families because those are the ones we're most connected to. So over the years, we've honored families, including, the Gupta family with Rohit Group,
Hmm.
The Hutchinson family with Daytona Homes, the Shaw family with Shaw Communications,
Yeah.
the Melton family with the Melton family with Melcor, and
Right.
then the last year was the Lolisher family and Western Moving and Storage.
Yeah.
So they've been around for, they're now in the fourth generation. But what made their story a little bit unique was that they actually sold the family business twice
Hmm.
and were able to get it back in different ways. So they're now running it for the third time in the fourth generation.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Um, have you been able to pick up any kind of learnings from the conversations that the first generation is having with second generation and even third generation in these families? And like, what are you teaching people at the Institute about what you've learned?
So a lot of what we look at there is more, kind of the importance of planning, the importance of governance, and trying to do those things, as a family, engaging, academics and facilitators, but also, one of the other programs we have is called the Roadmap program. So we have these conversations with families and take them through the curriculum around, strategic decision making or governance or succession, or AI, but we
Mm,
do it with a group of, kind of 3 to 4 people per family, or business family. And then we try to bring them together with a cohort of other families.
yeah.
So you're not just hearing from us. You're not just hearing from what we've heard or what we've researched. You're also hearing from other people who are on this journey, but maybe ahead or behind or at a different place than you are. And you
Mhm.
can kind of, both pressure test your ideas, but also learn from the things that they are actually doing,
Right.
or have done already.
Right. Have you seen a reluctance in some situations in giving up control, and or transferring responsibility to the next generation? Um, and some of the kind of the friction that can have within its own business.
Yeah, there's definitely lots around that. I think all successions and transition events are difficult. It takes a lot of, skill and trust to have that work, and a lot of, talented advisors, and people, on your team to get that to happen.
Mhm.
But, what I do see that's, maybe a little bit more not transactional or human, but I find that, in talking with a group of next gens yesterday, almost all of them are going through a succession or thinking of that succession in the future. And most of them are saying, well, their biggest complaint is around, or the biggest thing that they're trying to navigate is how do we, you know, that their father or their mother hasn't had that conversation about what that looks like with them yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when I talk to people who are running the businesses, they're saying very similar things. They're like, well, I'm trying to, set my next gen up for success, but they haven't asked me about the succession yet.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like that same common complaint, but from 2 very different perspectives. And
Yeah.
it's, both of them are sitting there waiting for the other one to take the initiative.
Right. Yeah. And just that lack of communication is creating friction within the relationship, and that plan is on hold until that's known, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about that lack of communication, what are you as a professional or even the institute thinking about, like the dynamics around a family meeting? Like when is it needed? How should it be organized? And even some tips around having a really, really effective family meeting.
Yeah. So on kind of that family governance side, we definitely encourage them to happen, you know, not quickly. You always want to take some time to figure out what the the intent and the outcome is going to be. But
Uh-huh.
often, just the process of going through having the meeting is enough, is almost enough. So
Yeah.
it's by having that opportunity to have the communication. And even if the first meeting, if the only thing on the agenda is, hey, we're going to start having meetings, let's
Yeah.
talk about what people might want to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is often enough to get it going.
Okay.
And it's, same kind of thing where everyone might be waiting for other people to make the move.
Yeah.
And by having that forum or that place to bring questions that people learn, is kind of a safe environment,
Yeah.
whether it's, facilitated by the family or with an outside advisor, it really brings kind of that structure that they need just
Mhm.
to feel comfortable having the conversation.
Yeah. 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 And frequency wise, like once there is a rhythm to these meetings, what have you seen in terms of a successful frequency? Is this an annual meeting or is it more frequent than that, Matt?
I think it depends on what they're looking to do. If they're, working through an event, or a future event or transition. So
Yeah.
if they're working through their wills or their estate plan, or if they're working through the business succession plan, or if they're, also active in the business governance and want to have this as a medium for other family members to be engaged in that
Yeah.
business governance
Yeah.
information. Having, quarterly or monthly might make sense.
Hmm.
But, otherwise it can be, something that's connected to before a family vacation or before a family event. And just, not doing it when you're on vacation, but kind of as
Hmm.
a lead up to or an after part of it can be quite
Yeah.
helpful sometimes.
Yeah.
So
I think
like,
Yeah, I think you're right on the mark, Matt. Like in the clients that we serve, when we see there's family business in connection to wealth that goes across generations, there's a lot of weight that is being carried by
mhm,
first and second and third generations. And yeah, the families that are communicating when there's a kind of a known plan for transition, I think the level of satisfaction is a lot higher.
yeah,
The unknowns can just be daunting and just really, really heavy to like what's going to happen with my life? Like, I'm not sure how things are going to go. You can kind of hear these statements and yeah, what you're talking about is, I think it makes a lot of sense. Matt, you wrote a piece that is in your blog, and if I'm going to put the link into the notes of this conversation for our
mhm,
clients, but you write under the title of the long table,
mhm,
thinking about large family having a big meeting, and you were able to attend a symposium in Germany, and this symposium talked about how the wealthy and some of the world's wealthiest families are interacting with the financial system,
mhm,
and how some of these activities might not be in the best interest of society as a whole with regards to information and such. But can you just walk our guests through what you learned at that conference? I found it really interesting,
mhm.
and yeah, let's talk a little bit about the actions and the roles of the most wealthy.
Yeah, so it was a pretty fascinating kind of opportunity and event to be part of. So it was actually put on by the Volkswagen Foundation. So we went out to a castle in Germany to have these conversations. It was kind of a interesting mix. There's about 40 to 50 academics from various fields. So a lot of
Mm,
people who looked at family business, like myself, and a lot of people who looked at family offices a little bit more specifically. And then there's some other people who came from, either sociology or, anthropology type backgrounds who have a different approach on how they study family businesses or family wealth.
mhm,
So a lot of what we were looking at here is, there is a lot of conversations about, kind of the bottom, or the percent of the population that's struggling the most and
mhm,
what society should be doing for them. So there's often conferences or conversations around that.
mhm,
But there isn't a lot of conversations about what's the reciprocal of that. So instead of looking at the bottom 1%, what if we looked at the top 1%? And that's, again, not a number that framed the discussion, because I know there's some negative connotations towards talking about that. But it
yeah.
was really just, how can we look at some of the, the potential. So the conference was actually called, I think it was like, it was either unleashing or leashing family wealth.
Mm,
So it was more like, what is the potential for that, and
yeah.
how can we work with a cross section of people with different disciplines to have that conversation of you know with these large amounts of wealth in certain places, what what is the responsibility to give back? What
Mhm,
is the responsibility around things as simple as um, inheritance taxes
Mm,
and, moving money out of province or out of country. What does that look like? And how can you set up a country or a government or a system to benefit more from how they look at policies that way?
yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of the conversations we had there were really about, what is that responsibility that comes with it? And
Hmm.
how do we, what's the role of those families, but also their advisors?
Mm, okay. And then the idea that having a plan for transition in connection to how the tax system is set up, um, and kind of being organized with this system allows these families to make decisions that can be in kind of better harmony with the world. Um, we don't want wealthy families going off and hiding money in places that avoids tax. It's not good for any. It's not good for society, right? So,
Mhm.
was there comments about um, what the financial system can do to kind of lower some of those activities?
Yeah, so there's some kind of initial thoughts, and we are going to be working on some research and publishing some things that will come out of this conference. Even something as simple as like, if you look at the country or the province tax structure around inheritance of wealth,
Hmm.
what if you change that to have an offset credit or something like that with certain charitable or foundation establishment?
Right.
And again, there's types of benefits and incentives that exist, I'm sure, and
Hmm.
I'm sure you know more of those for your clients than I do. But
Hmm.
it's like, how can you start to think about that in a larger picture, and how can you start to try to have some of those incentives there?
Yeah.
Um, and it was even some of the other countries that were there, or they would talk about how in their country this is how it works, and they're you know they know that 50 the wealth is automatically split among 50% to every single kid, or equally amongst the heirs every
Yeah.
single time, versus where there isn't that clarity in some other countries and states. How do you still have that transparency around succession or
Hmm.
around transition or transfer of wealth? But then there's other ones where there's some examples we talked about where a certain family had made the decision that they were going to give away all of the wealth and
Hmm.
not pass it on. And if they do that before they die, they're that's basically their ability. But in the particular country that this case study came from, or that this example came from, once they passed away, that decision was no longer theirs, even if their will said, you must give 50% to this charity.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a connection to people's trust of government and their support of the actions of the government and their willingness to pay tax. I've seen behaviors of individuals either in things you read or things you see around people that don't like their government and their willingness to do absolutely anything to
Mhm.
avoid tax. And people that, generally speaking, I think Canadians trust our government, not all the time, but
Yep.
the reluctance to pay taxes is much lower than in some other parts around the world. Um, I think these kind of conversations around how we connect wealthy people to um, still plan for taxes, do planning, try to lessen the burden, but like not completely avoid and run away. I think that's good for the entire world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And some of the kind of conversations that we had too is, would there be an opportunity for people to want to pay more taxes if they could better support or control or influence where they
Mm.
went?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Um, so it's that, quite often, especially when you have that societal lens on, and most, wealthy people are still people, and they have, feelings and things that they're passionate
Hmm.
about.
Hmm.
And they want to be able to, efficiently and effectively support those endeavors.
Yeah.
So if you change kind of that influence level, or that directive level, there
Hmm.
could actually be more people who would almost even self-select to pay more taxes if they knew where it was going.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Matt, you've worked in across Canada. You've worked in New York.
Mhm.
You've been in business consulting and at the kind of major accounting levels and worked for some pretty serious corporations. What have you noticed about the Alberta entrepreneurial spirit? Like, is there a spirit of the West? Is there something different than a family business in Alberta in comparison to Central or Eastern Canada, or even in the United States?
So I think kind of the Alberta advantage, or kind of what makes the families that I work with here different to a lot of the other ones, is often more, when you look at Alberta, you might find some third or fourth generation family businesses, but you're not going to find many that are older than that. So when our province was set up in like 1906 or 1905, I can never
Yeah,
remember which one of those it
yeah.
was.
I think the second one, then it go five.
Um, yeah, there isn't a lot of history there.
Yeah.
Where I just came back from 2 weeks in Europe, we were visiting family businesses there that were, in the 13th and 14th generation,
Wow.
and being able to have the track record and learnings from going through that, it is those types of learnings are very beneficial to Alberta families. But what we have here that I think some of those other places that are older don't have is almost some of that, like the guerrilla entrepreneur, or the really kind of the being willing to kind of roll up the sleeves and get things done. So it's more of that kind of, entrepreneurial building type environment where people are trying to get things to work and might not have, 500 years of money to support them to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Much. It's a new ventures, right?
Yeah.
And that makes our wealthy comparatively less wealthy than some of these other countries with much longer histories, right?
Mhm.
As a okay, we can't have a conversation these days without talking about artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
What are you seeing in the academic community, and that tying into your work with family business? How big of a deal is AI in terms of efficiency and kind of changing the trajectory of business?
Yeah, so that's a very large conversation. Definitely is massively transformative in how it in the potential that it has. Kind of the main things that we talk to families about in this space is one, a combination of like, how do you just start using it in a safe way that aligns with the values of that family and that business. And the more you try it, the more you can see the potential. Where I see the most resistant is from people who have had a couple of experiences and had it not work well, or not use it at all. So it's one of those, the more you look at it and the more you use it, the more you can see the opportunities. So the more you can have these curious questions around, well, what if it could do this for me?
Yeah,
And really, we also look at it as more of it's not something that is going to replace people per se. Like, that's not the outcome we're looking for, but it's how can you be more effective and efficient in how you're making decisions? How can you augment that human view with additional information or additional layers?
got it. Yeah, yeah. It's been fascinating to see this kind of develop over the last year and maybe a little bit longer in our space, and now seeing the kind of influence of agents
Mhm.
and the work that they can do. And this is not something that we're aggressively pursuing within our firm, but we're learning about it. We're seeing how it's impacting other parts of the financial services industry, and yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, the one example that's kind of fun that we use both with clients, and with some of the students,
Yeah,
in some of the classes I teach, is we've built a simulation. So we have a family business. You can read a little case about the family business, and
yeah,
then there's four different people that you can talk to, and it gives you, it's the father who started the business,
yeah.
and then the three kids who are working in the business in different capacities, and kind of what their personalities are. And
Right.
then you can go into a chat room and talk to each one of them. And then you present them with solutions of, hey, this is how you should have a family meeting, or this is what you should do with your corporate board. And
Mm,
they will react based upon the information that they have, which is sometimes more than you have,
yeah.
and the relationships between them. And then, after you've had those conversations and presented the solution, you can then, all four of them then respond back to you.
Yeah.
So we've seen some really fun learning from having those conversations
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and really kind of understanding how, these soft skills that we have in being able to make relationships and ask good questions are actually more important in an AI era than
Yeah.
they were before.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the thing we can leave our clients with is, I think a call to action to connect with the Institute. Any of our clients that are running family businesses, I think you would be, wise to connect to the Institute and take in some of the training and some of the events. Matt, what would be the best step for that connection? Is it an email introduction? Is it them attending an event? What do you think?
Yeah, so often the best place, like where we suggest people start, is either we have a podcast called Table Talk, where we kind of tell the story of different business families.
Mhm.
So that's a pretty digestible thing to do, and kind of, just under an hour segments where you can learn the story of, many different Alberta family businesses or advisors.
Mhm.
And then, the other one is, some of the courses we have, but those ones often aren't the starting point because they take a lot more trust to, sign up to do something and spend, 2 or 3 days of time with someone. You want to make sure you have that relationship with them first. So we
Yeah.
often see people starting with either the podcast, or our annual signature event, which is in October every year. We will be releasing the dates and the family shortly, but it is, I can leak a little bit. It's October 21st in Edmonton. The family story will be very interesting.
Okay.
And it's just a very different perspective on, family business and how they've developed over the years.
Yeah, very good. Matt, I really thank you for your time. This conversation was just as good as the one we had over coffee a few weeks ago, and the work that you're doing is really fascinating. And if I didn't have the job that I have, I think I might like your job. Seems like a pretty good gig.
It's a lot of fun, a lot of, really fun relationships and people I get to learn from and meet, and then, being able to share that knowledge and expertise within the
Yeah,
within the ecosystem.
absolutely. Appreciate your time, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Marshall.
Thank you.